Welcome to episode 12 of the Cycling Europe podcast. And once again, I'm not at my desk in Yorkshire. I've come away and I'm in Scotland at a place called Balloch, which is not too far from Glasgow, right on the end of Loch Lomond. And the reason I'm here is because I've been invited to speak to a group of people who are developing different parts of the long-distance Eurovelo 1 Atlantic cycle route, which starts in Portugal and finishes in Noordkap, and long stretches of that route made up the route that I cycled back in 2015 as I travelled between Tarifa and Noordkap. I did that last night, and what was also nice about last night, apart from meeting all these people and having the opportunity to speak to them, was that I met somebody called Paul Cheese. Now, years ago, I had an email exchange with Paul, and I remembered it because he's got a very distinctive name, Paul Cheese. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to the radio, and his name cropped up on Pick of the Week on Radio 4. I'd been invited to speak up here by a chap called Richard Weston, who's an academic down in Lancashire. And Richard had mentioned Paul Cheese in his emails. So when I heard him on the radio, all brought back memories. Why did I actually exchange emails with him? I'm still not very sure. But earlier this afternoon, after having met him yesterday, I took the opportunity of having a chat with Paul about his music, about his sound recording, and also obviously about his cycling, and how he managed to combine all three of those together into an interesting project which involved him travelling more or less to every nook and cranny of the British Isles.
Hi, I'm Paul Cheese. I'm a musician, sound artist and cycler.
Are you a musician first? Are you a cyclist first? Are you a sound technician first? Because you've got various different hats on there.
Yeah, I would say probably musician first, but then they come hand in hand with the cycling. So now I've amalgamated the two. So if I could put strings on a bike, I think that would cover everything.
Have you always been a cyclist, or is it something that you've just rediscovered recently?
I've had a bike since I was little, but it's never been such a major part of my life as it has come over the last 6 years.
And in terms of long distance cycling, when did you first do any of that?
That would be 2011, where I had, down the pub having a chat, get this ambition thing going of what if I went out my front door, turned left and kept going until I couldn't go any further, and I ended up cycling from my house to Land's End. And that was kind of the starting point of actually combining a bit of music with the cycling side of things. There's a bit of inspiration going on here. So
yeah, because we were in contact years ago. I still can't remember why exactly we contacted each other, but we did. So I've known about you, and you've got quite a distinctive name, Paul Cheese, which kind of makes it stick in my mind at least. How did the music become involved in the long distance cycling?
Well, it was really just. Well, it started on a snowboard actually, which is a bit distant from the cycling, but I was at the top of a mountain. I took a guitar to the top of the mountain. I was standing looking out at the Alps, singing and playing, and then that kind of evolved into me going down the mountain whilst singing and playing, which then kind of got the inspiration bit going of, well, if I can do that on a board, then what about if I did that on a bike? So then it started just thinking about music while cycling, and then that evolved into collecting sounds, writing songs in different places, and here I am, 6 years later, doing bigger and bigger trips every time.
Yeah, you need to invent a title which combines cyclist and musician. I can't think of one, but there we go. Now you've just done a project which involves cycling on quite a very detailed route across most of the United Kingdom. Can you explain what that project was and how it came about?
So the project's called the Big Record UK, and basically I wanted to find out what the UK sounded like. So I cycled 5,000 miles to every single region of the UK, collecting the sounds of people and places as I went, and then used those sounds to create a piece of music. my biggest day was 112 miles, which was through Scotland, which it was a character building day. But then other days I didn't go as far because I always judge my day on how high the climb will be, the elevation of a day, rather than my distance.
Not only were you on the bike with panniers and all the ordinary stuff that you take with you when you go cycle touring, but you took a heck of a lot of equipment with you.
Yeah, I carry about 45 kilos of gear, stuff. I've got a laptop, microphones, a guitar, a suit, because you never know who you're going to meet. And all the leads and microphone stands and everything that goes with it.
So you, the bike, all the normal equipment and 45 kilograms of extra equipment, that probably is going to be, well, I dread to think, 150 kilograms?
It pushes it over the edge, it really does. I mean, once you start adding in the food for a day and the extra bottles of water and everything, that's why I got through so many spokes.
So you were travelling around and you were recording sounds. What would make you, for example, here we're standing in a car park in Balloch in Scotland. If I were to hand you this recorder, what would you be recording now, inspired by what's around you?
Well, behind me, I think we've got it's either startled robin or blackbird, and then
yeah, there it is.
And then we passed an extractor fan, which had a lovely low hum. So we've got the slightly high rhythm of the robin, I think it is, and then the low rumble of the extractor fan.
Yeah, I'm desperately listening now for other sounds. Got the kind of cars in the distance, but I suppose they're always there, aren't they?
Yeah.
Different bird, I think, just there. Have you become a bit of an ornithologist?
It has gone that way. I've discovered birds that I never knew existed before. I can tell you some from my studies. I can tell you that blackbirds on the east of the country are at around 98 beats per minute. Their call. On the west of the country, of the UK, the call is about 110 beats per minute. And as you go over the Scottish borders, heading towards Edinburgh and then up towards Dundee, the blackbird calls are about 132 beats per minute.
That's the kind of statistic that you should be on Springwatch, talking to them about stuff like that. That's fascinating. There's probably a reason for that, I would imagine.
Yeah, again, it's sort of a study of all the different sounds. I mean, also more random, useless information. I can tell you that the average UK builder renders a wall at 98 beats per minute.
So you were recording people as well, but also people talking to a certain extent.
Yes, yeah. Well, it was sort of from curlews on Orkney to chemical reprocessing plants on Teesside. And as I was going, I basically started recording people saying the names of their towns and villages because I didn't want to get their names wrong when I was saying them back, all these different pronunciations. So then when I got back, I found I had about 250 people saying the name of their towns and villages, but in different regional accents, which was a lovely kind of byproduct of just capturing sound.
And you had a phenomenal amount of recorded material when you finished, yeah?
Yeah, I actually captured about 5.6 terabytes of audio and video and photos, and going through the lot, I had over 10,000 sounds.
You didn't just do them because you wanted to do them. You did have a plan to do something with them at the end, presumably, yeah?
Yes, yeah. The whole thing was to construct a piece of music. So when I got back after being on the road for 3.5 months, I pretty much then locked myself inside for 4 weeks to go through everything that I recorded, categorise the lot, find out what its nearest note was, and then find out what its nearest tempo was, and then trying to stay as true to the sound, the key of the note and the tempo, constructed the piece of music.
Were you camping? Were you using hotels, warm showers?
But the first bike trip I did, the Lamberhurst to Land's End, the Ambition, I camped. That was very character building, and absolutely it was great. But then after the trip afterwards, I started carrying a lot more equipment, and when you've got that amount of stuff to sort of charge up and feeding back every day, I ended up staying in cheap B&Bs and hostels.
Okay. And you were also, when you were doing the cycling, you set yourself a mission of calling in at all the BBC local radio stations along the way.
Yes, I visited 53 regional BBC offices, from Jersey to BBC Orkney, BBC Radio Foyle in Northern Ireland.
And you appeared on every single station?
Every single station. Yes.
Nobody kind of said, no, go away, we don't want to speak to you?
No, I was just overwhelmed by the response because of the local side of things. Going through different towns, I could tell you street names, great sounding local locations and great sounding local sounds, because again, it was the local information that was really key to the whole project.
And was it the location of those radio stations that dictated the route that you were taking?
They were points on a map. But then when I was talking to people on the way, I did a 400-mile detour to the middle of the north coast of Scotland, because someone said that I'd be able to capture a lovely sound of curlews there. So it was kind of really, they were the points on the map, but how I got to that next point was dictated by the people that I spoke to.
Are you going to go out and do new recordings and create new music?
Yeah, it's a kind of a combination of that. I want to finish a video to go with the piece, because I think it will make the sounds that I've captured come alive. Plus also I want to show really how great the UK is, because I've not only captured the sounds of people and places, I've seen some epic sites, epic places, and I want to get them in the video so that I can show that off really. I also want to be able to take it out and just spread the word of cycling and music. But then, yes, watch this space. I've got some ideas to take this worldwide as well.
So to replicate what you did in Britain in other countries?
Yes, to see actually if different places around the world have a different key, a different resonance and a different tempo.
As a cyclist, you often get people coming up to you simply because you're a cyclist and you've got 4 panniers on the bike, and you're a bit of an oddity sometimes, or you feel a bit of an oddity, and people will come up and chat to you because they're genuinely curious as to what the hell you're doing. If you're carrying a guitar and that kind of equipment, presumably you got a lot of attention from people you were just passing by in the street.
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing about the bike is it does make you approachable, and again, lovely thing of people coming up to have a chat. People love to share their cycle stories with you as well, because then I wonder where he's going, I need to say what I'm doing, because we kind of share a common ground, and it's really, really lovely, the people you meet on the way.
So what was your favourite area for sounds?
I'm not being diplomatic, I will say actually every region I went to had a special sound, and I can think of those sounds and I'm right back there, and every single sound was kind of the stepping stone to the next. So whether it was the wind through barbed wire fences making a lovely bass sound in Dorset, or whether it was Roy dropping a skip on Teesside, there's sort of like sonic qualities to different places.
Okay, so you dodged that question. So what is your favourite sound that you recorded?
There's so many, but I will pick one of the first ones, which was down in Folkestone in Kent. I was on Abbott's Cliff and I was standing in front of one of the big sound mirrors. They sort of reflect the sound of incoming aircraft from the Second World War. So ideal place to sort of start. I think I was about an hour or so in. I set up loads of my gear and everything to test everything out, and as I'm standing there messing around, a Spitfire flew in front of me about 100 metres away, and it was just like that. I've got goosebumps now, not that you can hear the sound of goosebumps, but it's just one of those moments that I hadn't even really started yet, and that's that.
Well, perhaps that is the sound of goosebumps, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, the rasp of a Merlin engine going, yeah.
Right, I'm going to wander back and to the hotel because we're both up here at a Eurovelo 1 event, And I'm going to wander back to the hotel. I think you're going to go back inside, aren't you? But I'm going to try and record some sounds on my way back to the hotel, and I'll play them to you later, and you can give me your thoughts.
Okay, fantastic.
I failed miserably in my attempt to record any sounds on my way back to the hotel. The sounds that you heard there were some of those recorded by Paul Cheese on his cycling audio recording tour of the UK earlier this year. You can find out more about Paul's travels and his audio work on his website, thebigrecord.com. A reminder that you're listening to episode 12 of the Cycling Europe podcast. Now, I'm back home in West Yorkshire, but I'm casting my mind back to 2010 when I cycled from my then home in Reading to southern Italy along the length of the Eurovelo 5. Having written my first book, Crossing Europe on a Bike called Reggie, about that particular journey, I've been contacted by many people over the years asking for advice because they're planning a similar cycle themselves. Now, normally these budding long-distance cyclists thank me for the advice, but only very occasionally do they get back to me to say how they got on when they attempted the cycle themselves. A few weeks ago, I did receive one of these follow-up emails, and it was from a woman called Jess, who I'd exchanged messages with earlier this year. Back in June, she explained that it was her plan to cycle from Lucca, that's near Pisa, back home to London, with a friend of hers who, to make life complicated, is also called Jess. In 2010, I cycled north to south. In her email to me, Jess made the following comments. Do you have any thoughts about going the other way? We haven't done any cycle touring before and are a mix of very nervous and quite excited. That was her writing before the trip. In her email after the trip, she said the following. It was an incredible experience and the first of many bike touring adventures, I'm sure. Hi, Jess.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
As I said, it's so nice to have somebody come back to me with kind of an update of their own trip once they've contacted me initially for a bit of advice about one of the trips that I've done. But anyway, it is nice that you did that, so thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, you are Jess Odone, you said, yeah?
Yes, Jess Odone, yeah.
Okay, brilliant.
And I travelled with a friend called Jess Derbyshire.
Okay, that sounds actually a little bit Italian. Odone, is it?
Yeah, it is actually. The surname is Italian. Part of the reason for me being in Italy was because I have this Italian heritage, but I don't actually have any Italian family still, sadly.
Right, because that was going to be my first question is, what were you doing in Italy in the first place? Because obviously, when I did bicycle, I did it from England to southern Italy. Yeah. You did it in reverse, or the reverse to what I did it in. You were travelling south to north. So what had you been doing in Italy immediately prior to the cycle?
So I'd taken a few months off work and wanted to... I've just always really liked Italy, and I think partly because of my Italian heritage, I wanted to spend some time there. So I'd spent a month in Florence doing a language course, and the month following that I'd spent on a farm woofing, which is volunteering on an organic farm, all in Tuscany. Yeah, the third kind of part of my trip was this cycle home, which kind of was planned from Italy. So it was all very fully planned. I kind of had intended to do some kind of cycle, but the actual planning of the cycle only happened once I actually arrived in Italy.
Right, it all sounds very idyllic. A farm in Tuscany, language courses in Lucca, I think you said you were, yeah?
Yeah, that's right.
And then the plan to obviously cycle back home. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it was a really great few months. Quite varied, I guess, what I was doing. So they all kind of complemented each other quite nicely. And I did a bit of Italian at school, so I had a bit of basic Italian. But being able to communicate in Italian kind of for the first bit of the trip was actually really helpful as well. So they all kind of complemented each other nicely.
And just out of interest, what do you do back in Britain? What's your job here?
I'm a doctor. I'm kind of deciding what kind of doctor I want to be, having worked for a few years. And so we've kind of I'm in quite a good position in that you can be kind of flexible and take a bit of time out, and it doesn't really impact on the next stage of your training. So I was taking advantage of that flexibility. And Jess, my other friend, is also in the same position. So, and we both kind of had some free time to take advantage of, really.
Well, I was going to ask you a bit later if you had any problems. I hope you didn't have to put your medical training into practice on yourself, but we'll come to that in a few minutes. Now, you'd never done any cycle touring before, so how did you come up with the idea of actually cycling back from northern Italy?
I think so at university I used to cycle around town quite a lot, and through that, during university, I had friends who did a bit of had racing bikes. So I got a racing bike during university and used to go on kind of day-long trips, and really enjoyed it, and did some kind of slightly longer where we'd rent a house or something and go cycling every day. Never cycle toured with kind of bags, but always had friends of friends who did it, and had seen photos on the internet and thought I'm sure I'd really love doing that, because I really like camping, and kind of combining the two I always thought was something that I would really like to do. But I guess but having to have the kit probably was the biggest thing that put me off, or it stopped me from actually doing it. I don't know I think I was in Tuscany in the first week I'd gone to Italy with a friend of mine who's quite adventurous, and she had recently bought a motorbike, and I'd met her in Tuscany. She'd motorbiked from London to Tuscany, and I think I said to her, do you think I could cycle home? Do you think that's a ridiculous proposal or a suggestion? And if I can't find anyone to do it with me, I could just do it on my own. Would that be? Do you think I should do it? And she was like, yeah, definitely, just go for it. And then I think it was her kind of being encouraging of it. And I think that's when I started Googling things and found your website, and was reading lots of the comments you'd been making, and it just sounded less kind of scary or less like an impossible task.
So how much out of, or on perhaps a scale of 0 to 10, in terms of how far it was outside your comfort zone, where would you put it?
I'd say probably 5 or 6. I think I'm quite adventurous spirited. I like doing things. I like physically challenging myself, and I've travelled quite a lot. So I felt like it was kind of, I didn't know whether it was possible, whether I could do it.
Did you do much training before setting off, or were you already fairly fit?
I was fairly fit. So I ran a marathon earlier in the year, so I was fit kind of cardiovascularly from that. But then I spent 2 months in Italy not doing much exercise because it was very hot. I think I went on 2 runs, and I had my bike with me, but wasn't really using it because I don't know, I was quite busy doing other things. And the week before I started, I cycled through Tuscany on my own before Jess arrived. So I guess that was the only training I did.
Okay.
So no, we were not very prepared.
Now you made a little video which I posted to my website, cyclingeurope.org, and it was interesting seeing that for the first time, because actually a lot of the images that you captured in that video brought back memories, because I'd been in exactly the same place. For example, the Passo del Cisa, I think that's the pronunciation, which you've got across. That's kind of the first climb, isn't it? Coming out of, if you're heading north and heading out of Lucca or heading out of Pisa. Obviously, you had the Alps coming up in the distance, in the medium distance. Yeah. But how did you find the climbing of that first particular that first climb? Because that must have been the first challenge.
Yeah, it was really tough. So I was in Lucca already, but Jess flew out to Pisa. We actually thought we had a bit longer for the trip. We thought we had about 30 days, but then she remembered, or hadn't remembered, that she had a wedding, her cousin's wedding, and so it meant, and I had a job to come back to, so it meant that our trip was suddenly shortened, and we had less time to kind of get back. But we decided to still go for it anyway. But we kind of knew we were time pressured. So she arrived on this Sunday evening, having been at her cousin's wedding the night before. So she was extremely hungover. But we knew that we had to take off the next day. Otherwise, we didn't really have a chance of making it back. So she kind of had that in the background. It was really, really warm. And we hadn't, I think the first few days of anything like this would be tough. But maybe was made especially tough. And I don't think psychologically we were ready for kind of climbing straight away. We went up quite high. The first day wasn't too much climbing, but the second day was a lot of climbing over the Passo della Sisa. It was tough, is my memory of it. You get to the top, and then we had a huge sense of achievement, and then there was a lot of downhill. So I think that kind of played out for the whole trip. But the highs and lows of feeling like you've achieved something, and then you have the pleasure of going down the other side, really helps with that kind of the psychological challenge of it.
Yeah, because when I was cycling south from England, for probably quite a few weeks before I hit the Alps, I was really travelling more or less on the flat. The Vosges Mountains were kind of a little hiccup in the middle, but for most of the route until I arrived at the Alps, it was all relatively flat. But whereas you had to almost immediately, within the first 48 hours, start climbing over the Apennines there, or... Yeah. And then when you got to the Alps themselves, did you go via the Gotthard Pass?
We did, yeah. So we went through to Chino. We went up past Lake Como, and Lake Lucerne was on the other side. So in between Lake Como and Lake Lucerne, there's the Gotthard Pass. I think felt extremely scared because if you Google the Gotthard Pass and see these beautiful images of just really, really windy roads that look kind of intimidating, but really beautiful. So we just kind of, again, just didn't really know whether our legs would carry us over with our very heavy bags, and took it quite easy and tried, planned to do kind of short distances, but it was still just up and up and up for quite a few days in a row.
Where did you stay overnight? Did you stay in Airolo? Did you stay at the top of the mountain, the Gotthard Pass? Where did you camp?
That was one of the few days that we didn't camp because it had rained all day on our lead up to Airolo. So in Airolo, we stayed in a little, an older Italian man's guest house, kind of dried our stuff, and we had a little meal, and just basically tried to dry off before setting off quite early the next morning. It's a cobbled path, which is kind of strange, I guess, having been cycling on tarmac roads up to that point. And I guess we knew it was cold pass, and we were a bit nervous about what that would mean for kind of us with our very full panniers. But it was quite, because we were going so slowly, it was quite comfortable to cycle on. There weren't that many cars going up. It was just us for most of the route up. And then there were a few other cyclists kind of not without panniers, so going a bit faster than us. My main memory is there were loads of cows with the funny Swiss cowbells on. So just kind of all the way up as we were kind of gradually making slow progress. I just remember hearing loads of cowbells and just kind of quite enjoying being aware of them kind of in the background. It was, very peaceful and it physically tough, but very beautiful. The image that you see on the internet is obviously from above, so you never really fully get the same sense of quite how loopy and winding the road is. It was just kind of hairpin bend after hairpin bend, and it got quite windy near the top, so on one direction down the hairpin you were being quite helped by the wind, and then the other direction you were really going against it, so it got quite difficult just before the top. But no, it was a very good day. I really enjoyed it.
For anybody who's not familiar with the Gotthard Pass, it's worth perhaps pointing out that there are two ways up and two ways down. The cars and the lorries and most of the traffic go on the fast road, which takes you up there quite quickly. But obviously on a bike, and some cars, I think, I seem to remember there were some cars when I did it, take the old cobbled road, which is obviously a lot more pleasant. But obviously the downside of that is that you're on cobbles, but they're not massive cobbles, are they? They're not kind of like cobbles that we find up here in West Yorkshire. They're pretty small, tame cobbles, so it's not too bad to cycle on it. What was your impression of all of those buildings and the people up there?
So when we got to the top, we felt like huge sense of achievement. I think partly because, as I keep saying, we just didn't really believe that we necessarily would be able to get, that we physically would be able to get to the top. But at the top, there's a bit of a complex, which I don't think I fully understood who the people there were. I think there are like 4 or 5 buildings with restaurants and just lots of people who are kind of in a mix of coaches and cars. But I think they're kind of stopping for lunch and because it's quite a well-known pass. So we treated ourselves to a lunch at the top and there was lots of there were some Swiss musicians playing, so it all felt quite celebratory. But yeah, it's kind of a funny place at the top, and it was very cloudy the day we got there. So we didn't have particularly good views, or it wasn't particularly beautiful up there because it was, the main impression was these kind of not very beautiful concrete buildings.
I remember going up there and arriving at the top myself and being a bit. It was obviously the elation of getting up to the top, the high point physically of the entire trip is fantastic, but actually it's a bit disappointing when you see all those people and you see all the horrible buildings up there. You think, yeah, I feel as I've kind of earned a treat at the top here in terms of a bit of isolation. And in my mind I was dreaming of a little Swiss chalet with just me and a cup of hot chocolate, looking down on the great views. And the problem is I had to share it with all these other people. So you've passed you've got over the main hurdle in the Alps. I would imagine the next part through Switzerland was probably quite a beautiful ride in the direction of France.
Yeah, so we got to the top of the Gotthard Pass and then headed down towards Andermatt. And yeah, we just loved cycling in Switzerland. It was just so beautiful. And as you pointed out in your response to me, that Switzerland has got an incredible cycle network, which is all signposted, and we didn't use any technology to guide us whilst in Switzerland, which was just so fun, liberating, really. So we just followed the little arrows which guided us right from the south all the way to the north. Yeah, it was just a beautiful country to cycle in. I think made especially beautiful by the kind of ease of travel of their cycle network.
Yeah, that cycle network is fantastic, and as is the signage, because you never really have the opportunity of getting lost, even if you wanted to. One question I've got for you, actually, because obviously I did it back in 2010, and I saw no signs whatsoever, all the way from Canterbury down to Brindisi in the south of Italy. I didn't see one Eurovelo 5 sign. Did you see any Eurovelo 5 signs?
We didn't actually, but so in Italy there were quite a lot of Via Francigena signs. I don't know if you saw cycling specific Via Francigena signs. So I don't know if that's been developed since you were cycling, but that we didn't trust them, which was a problem because a few times it was kind of confusing where they were guiding us. So we ended up having to use our own maps anyway. Whereas in Switzerland it was amazing because you genuinely could just trust completely that it was always very obvious where to go. We did see other Eurovelo signs. I think it was Eurovelo 15 around Basel. We were aware of other people kind of taking a slightly different Eurovelo route, but we didn't see any Eurovelo 5 signs, I don't think.
Yeah, you probably saw. Yeah, the Eurovelo 15 goes through that kind of corner of the world. You probably saw signs as well for the Eurovelo 6, which is the one that goes along the Loire in France and then heads over to the Black Sea eventually. When you arrived in Basel, did you then just follow the Rhine north?
We weren't really sure which route to take because we were kind of time limited. We were trying to work out which way would most quickly get us back without kind of going on too many hills, basically. We went across to Strasbourg and then headed north, basically, and thought we'd go into Belgium, but we didn't actually. Oh no, sorry, that's not true. We kind of snuck into Belgium for a bit, but then back into France after going through Luxembourg. I'm kind of skipping ahead.
That's quite similar to what I did because I suppose I was keen just to make some progress. So actually, arriving in France from the north, I just kind of headed as quickly as I could in the direction of Strasbourg initially, but I kind of almost stayed clear of Belgium for no good reason other than I fancied getting somewhere where it was a bit warmer and a bit drier, and that never really happened for me. But anyway, did you encounter any problems along the way?
We were kind of nervous about bike problems because we weren't, we have kind of basic, we can change inner tubes, and that's probably about it. But we were very lucky that we didn't actually get one single puncture along the whole way, which is pretty incredible. And the only problems, we did have a slight problem with the other Jess's bike when we were putting, she arrived in Pisa and her bike had all been packaged up, and she'd put on her little pedals, and basically hadn't put them in completely flush, and so it ended up tightening itself but at an angle, and it kind of a minor issue really, but we ended up taking it out and putting it in flush, and threads were kind of damaged, and we were a bit worried that it would end up pushing us back a couple of days, but the threads kind of held, and they were fine. So that was the only kind of worrying bike related issue, but not getting a puncture was pretty incredible.
I think anybody who's taken a bike on a plane will sympathise with your issues with the pedals. I would imagine lots of people have had issues. Either they're too difficult to get off, or they've damaged the thread like you did there.
Yeah.
I would imagine that there's lots of people who will sympathise with that. What kind of bikes were you using? Were they road bikes or were they touring bikes?
So they were cyclocross bikes. So we got the same bike. They're Genesis Quadifer. So we got the entry level Quadifer because I think they do sell a touring range. We have a few friends who had them and kind of recommended them, and I've been kind of looking out for them for quite a few years, kind of trying to find a second-hand one that was coming up, and anyway, never ended up. We both just bought new ones, which I think is probably partly why we didn't have any issues. I'm now using it as a commuter bike in London, and it's a really great kind of versatile bike for kind of general commuting, but also slightly longer trips.
And if you were to do the exact same trip again from Lucca, Pisa, back up to London, is there anything that you'd do different this time?
I'd probably give a few more days, just because as I said, I had to start work, so we were very kind of time pressured, which I think added to the excitement of it and definitely made it a slightly different trip. Our legs were pretty exhausted near the end, and probably just to have a rest day, so we didn't have any rest days, which is a bit mad, but probably would have just had a couple of rest days to pause rest our legs a bit.
You were cycling for 17 days.
Yeah.
What was the average number of kilometres per day?
It averaged at 60 miles a day. So near the end, we were kind of going between 70, 80, 90 miles to kind of catch up, because in the first days, kind of, especially when we were climbing up to the Gotthard Pass, we were kind of averaging about 30, 40 miles a day. So it kind of, the average for the whole 17 days was 60 miles a day.
Okay, so that's a good distance, isn't it?
It was fun. If
you had to pick out one perhaps day of cycling or one particular location along the trip which really stands out in your memory, which would it be? Probably
in Switzerland, some of the lakes. So Lake Lucerne was incredibly beautiful. We were having breakfast one morning. It was the morning after climbing the Gotthard Pass. So we were having breakfast just by the lake, and Switzerland is just such a picturesque country.
Would you, or are you perhaps planning on doing something similar again?
I think so. I'm taking a few more months off work this year. I'm planning to do a similar trip, but maybe a bit longer, now that we have proven that we can travel quite long distances with just our bikes. I think both Jess and I are keen to try something further, perhaps. Maybe with the same idea, fly somewhere and cycle home. I'd quite like to cycle a bit in Scandinavia. I haven't really made any progress on exactly where that will be, but I think Scandinavia is top of my list. But it's just trying to work out weather-wise when is best to do that.
Well, I can certainly recommend Scandinavia. That's a beautiful place to go. And if you like Switzerland, then Scandinavia is kind of a colder version of Switzerland to a certain extent in terms of its picturesque, spectacular views. Yeah. Final question. You originally contacted me for advice. Now that you've done the trip, what advice would you pass on to anybody else who was thinking of doing that or something similar?
I think I'd say go for it, because I think it feels like a big step to take, especially kind of having to invest in maybe a bike that's suitable and good kit. I'd just say if you think you might enjoy it and feeling a bit nervous about it, just go for it.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks for having me.